I'm off to a good start then. So as Christy said, I'm Jen Nelsen. I work on contract as a project coordinator with a few different groups. And today I'll be talking about some work that I do to help the Nature Conservancy as a coordinator for the Chesapeake 4R Alliance. I'll be going over about 4 things, basic coverage of the 4R Nutrient Stewardship concept, the Chesapeake 4R Alliance, who we are and what we're trying to do, some strategies that we've identified for Delmarva, and some opportunities for collaboration with agribusinesses and other partners. Okay, so we're going to try something. I'm going to switch. Yeah, we're going to escape out now. Now this may have been, this was either a good idea or a bad idea on my part. We're going to decide here. So it's the first poll when it comes to the 4Rs. So basically, I wanted to make this fairly interactive. I'm not a researcher. I do a lot of my work just by dialogue and discussions and things like that. So I look at this as a kind of a discussion myself. So we're going to have a few of these polls scattered throughout the presentation where I'm looking for feedback from you. And this involves your smartphone or any phone. So I know just having kind of sat through a lot of these that everybody kind of has their phone out already probably.
Supposed to turn them off during presentation.
So we have to do this setup one time to get this working, and then once we've done the setup, it'll work for the rest of the polls throughout the thing. So what you do to get this to work is you send a text message, and the number that you send it to is 22333. Okay. So that's the kind of phone number that you're sending it to, and then the message that you're sending it to. Or the message that you're sending is Jennifer NELS 638, and you hit send.
Does it matter if it's captioned or not?
No, it doesn't matter if it's captioned. So you hit send, and that's what you do to join the poll. Okay, and again, JENNIFER.
That goes to 2 again?
Oh, the first number here, this is 22333.
Time.
Yep.
Sorry.
So what's the message, Jen?
And then Jennifer NELS.
That goes to the 2 line or something else?
That's the text you're sending itself is Jennifer NELS 638.
You get
Talk about what that means.
You hit send, and you should get a response, a confirmation that says you've joined the poll.
Yep.
Okay. And I promise, I know this is a little cumbersome, but we only have to do that part once.
Yeah, but you're speaking too fast and I can't read up there. So Jennifer?
Okay. Jennifer
Okay.
NELS
And,
638, and then hit send. Okay. Okay. And so I'm going to give it just another minute.
Just being you have to be purposeful with it.
Oh.
can we answer?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to skip ahead. For those of you who have joined the poll, that you would answer the question. If you can name what all of the 4Rs are, this is just kind of gauging your familiarity. If you know what all the 4Rs are and you can name them without Googling,
You go through that.
and send. If you've heard of the 4Rs, but you can't say what they are, I apologize. I'm responsible for that. Then you hit B and hit send. And if you've never heard of the 4R concept at all,
The way the soybeans are growing and responding to that growing.
so this is just kind of gauging everybody's familiarity with this concept to begin with.
Are you able to tell how many people have been in the car?
I don't think so. I don't think I get. If you've ever heard of the 4 R's at all, then just hit C and send. If you've heard of them, B and send.
Acre per day after midnight. I'll show. Take on bullets and I'll go into the wheat.
Yeah, so once you've joined, and you would just, yep. Yep. Okay. I'm ready to move on unless anybody's like, no, wait, more time, please. Okay, everybody's happy with that. All right, then let's, yeah, we can go back to the presentation. All right, so now the poll, that's the last time we have to do that setup. Next time we do the poll, everybody can just kind of submit their responses and we don't have to go through the cumbersome joining and all of that, so. Okay, so now we go to the next, or I can go to the next one. Okay, so the 4 R's, not that everybody doesn't already know this apparently. When we talk about the 4R nutrient stewardship concept, we are talking about applying the right nutrient source at the right rate, at the right time, and in the right place. Now even I looked over at the slide, which I know what the 4R. It's a trick, yeah, it's a terrible mnemonic device. I say that all the time because 4 rights is not very helpful actually remembering what the 4 R's are. But as you know, it's been established for a few years now. It's a concept that came out of the Midwest with the Fertilizer Institute and the International Plant Nutrition Institute. So I think we're kind of stuck with it at this point. But one thing that I want to point out here too is around the outside of the circle you see environmental, economic, and social. And what we're talking about there is the context that we're making these decisions in. So what constitutes the right source, the right rate, the right time, the right place? It has to be right in the environmental, economic, and social context. When we talk about social, we're talking about quality of life, time management decisions. Out here, sometimes I think that gets extended to regulatory issues and kind of messaging and showing that ag is doing a good job and things like that. So the 4 R's have to be right within those contextual pieces in order to be right. So that's what we're getting at. And one of the other things I'd like to point out is if one of those factors is wrong, the others can't be right either. And just a couple of examples of what I mean by that. On the bottom on the bottom left, rather, looking at UAN damage, there's nothing wrong with UAN as a source. There's nothing wrong exactly with the rate that it was applied here. Or even the placement of it. It had to do with the timing of it. You know, there's nothing unusual about it. It was just applied late and it burned the corn. So because of the timing of it, the other 3 factors ended up being wrong. In another time, it wouldn't have been a wrong decision. And sulfur deficiency, same kind of thing. You know, because that is deficient in sulfur, it's going to impact the yield overall, and so it's not making as efficient use of all of its other nutrients. So the nutrient sources and the rates and everything are off on everything else because it's deficient in that one nutrient source. Okay. Now I mentioned before that the 4 R's are an effort that had come out of the Midwest. So, and they do put out a lot of good information and a lot of outreach. So we are trying to start up a local effort here, and it kind of begs the question for why. And there's 4 reasons. I say Delmarva isn't Iowa. It could be anywhere. But basically, we're just very specific in our location. We do have very different soils here. We have really coarse textured soils. They have a low nutrient holding capacity. They have a low water holding capacity. We have just different topography here. We have seasonally high water tables. We have irrigation and we have ditching, sometimes on the same fields. We have smaller fields in a lot of cases than they have out in the Midwest. And so a lot of the solutions that they come up with the economy of scale doesn't work out the same way here as it does out there. We have a robust poultry industry, which is good in lots and lots of ways, but it presents challenges in and of itself. We have better seafood. My dad is from North Dakota, and when he comes out and visits, he always loads up. We have close proximity. Well, he probably does, but but he definitely eats it when he comes here. And so, I mean, we have close proximity to the bay and kind of everything that goes along with that. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons why we have a need for localizing that effort, for tailoring it for our region, okay? Now, one question, if I don't get this question a lot, I think a lot of people think this question, at least, as far as when it comes to 4Rs and nutrient stewardship and everything, you know, haven't we done that here? Haven't we really kind of like run this into the ground here? We are so far ahead. Like this over here is Maryland and Delaware, and this over here is like everybody else, basically. And I think if you think back to that circle where we're looking at the economic and environmental conditions, if you're looking at it that way, then you're kind of asking the wrong question. All right, if you're looking at this from an economic standpoint, then the real question is, are you leaving productivity and profitability on the table? I mean, yeah, there are definitely areas where we can improve water quality as well, but the question is, are there areas where we can improve that profitability on top of what we're doing already? Okay, so I mentioned this already. So we have, that brings me to the Chesapeake 4R Alliance. We are linked kind of to the National Nutrient Stewardship effort, but we're based in Delaware and on Maryland's Eastern Shore. We are a diverse partnership of 4R stakeholders, and by that I mean everybody who kind of has a piece of this our decision concept. So agribusinesses have a piece of it, federal and state agencies, conservation districts, researchers, conservation organizations, and farmers. And one thing that I do is work really, really hard to make sure that those aren't partners in names. And to keep that many people engaged is not an easy task, just because everybody has kind of a different interest in it and everybody's busy. So, but we're trying to make sure that everybody has some value in this process, okay? It was co-founded just last year, 2015, not that long ago, by the Nature Conservancy and the Delaware Maryland Agribusiness Association. And this was founded before I came on board. And I just wanted to stop for a second here and let this sink in, because the Nature Conservancy and the Delaware Maryland Agribusiness Association, now, if you're me, before I come on board, and I look at this partnership, I really just thought that was the most interesting thing that had ever happened. Those are two very varied organizations, and I think that really underscored the fact that the values that we're speaking to with this 4R concept speaks to both of them and their core missions. Okay. So we came up with a little 30-second elevator pitch, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read the part that the main thing that we're getting to is that we are working to ensure that every nutrient application on Delmarva is consistent with the 4Rs. Ultimately, that's the goal that we're working toward here. So we're trying to do that in a few different ways. Okay. We are trying to identify the right strategies that work here, that that reduce nutrient loss and improve farmers' profitability, that hit those 2 points. We are working to provide outreach and information about our strategies. And we're working to communicate grower successes and develop new methods to credit farmers for their nutrient stewardship. When we were forming up and figuring out what we were trying to do, we heard from a lot of partners and stakeholders that was a really important thing, especially in this region, to communicate the good things that farmers were doing. Now, one thing that I recognized and that I wanted to point out is that nutrient stewardship is kind of a fuzzy concept. It's made up of a lot of individual decisions throughout the growing season, okay? If you think back to that slide earlier about the UAN damage and sulfur deficiency, there are probably 100 decisions that a farmer makes throughout the growing season, and they're all important, and they vary in importance throughout the growing season as to which one is impacting nutrient stewardship and profitability and environmental losses and things like that. And from our perspective, it's not practical or feasible to try and impact or oversee or manage every one of those decisions, right? So we can talk about it as a concept, but really for us, we had to figure out a way to kind of focus on efforts on things that we could impact and change. So we're recognizing that it's not limited to what we're focused on, but we had to kind of narrow it down a little bit. Now with this, I don't want to get too deep into where this graph came from. It came from a study, but one of the things that I wanted to point out here is it was a study about nutrient use efficiency, and we did narrow in on that concept pretty quickly. But one of the things that I wanted to point out with nutrient use efficiency, it gets touted, I'd say, as a really good concept to measure from. But I think that you have to be really careful when you're talking about nutrient use efficiency.
Talk about plant.
Have really, really excellent nutrient use efficiency and really terrible profitability. You know, so we wanted to recognize that strictly having really good nutrient use efficiency isn't our goal necessarily. You know, you can apply 50 pounds of nitrogen and have excellent nutrient use efficiency. The crop takes up all of it and then some, you know, but you haven't really had a crop, you know. So what we were looking for was not necessarily, we were looking for not situations where the farmer wins and the environment loses, not looking for situations where the environment wins and the farmer loses. We are looking for strategies for situations, for a set of decisions where both the farmer wins and the environment wins. And we think that there is plenty of room in that quadrant, in that sector to work in. There's definitely lots of solutions and kind of ideas and things being touted outside of that that people are looking at, but there's a lot of room to work within that as well. So again, we're trying to get this down to a manageable short list of practices that we can focus on, okay? Those that provide the greatest value to producers, those that are most effective at improving water quality, and frankly, things that we actually had capacity to impact. Either we had cost share funding to move it forward, or we could provide some kind of outreach, technical training, something like that, okay? Okay, so we've got our second poll. Everybody still got their phones, right? All right. So if you're us, the gist of this poll is going to be, which practices do we focus on? Let's see. Going to think about it. Yeah. So this one isn't going to be a multiple choice. This one you have to, this one you're actually going to have to type in a short answer and send it in once we activate it. So we've got to activate it. Yeah. So, see how I'm doing on time. So far, so good. Okay. I think. Oh. Bear with me.
I'm not sure why it's not showing it now. We did it the last time. Oh.
I broke it. I know. I did think, I was like, this is either going to be a really good idea or a really bad idea.
gotta do is display setting here. This is the slideshow, but then I'm going to leave the slideshow. Correct.
All right.
Still not up though.
Okay. So I think if you've already joined, I think you should just be able to text something in.
You're not giving a suggestion?
I'm not.
What should
No.
C4 priority practices be?
Yeah, so any kind of like best management practice or field practice. I don't want to give suggestions just because I know what I put for answers. That's going to be my next slide. I don't know, yield monitor calibration or side dressing or tissue testing or, you know, annual soil testing, grid sampling, you know, things like that.
Nobody knows what I'm saying.
Okay. This is fun. All right. Is everybody having whatever they want to put?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yes. Well, they're the same kind of concepts, though.
No. Okay.
No one knows what it is. Oh crap, it shows up up there like that.
It does. All right.
I can explain it. Why did something... It was the most recent one.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Yep. Okay. Okay. There we go. Okay. So this is what we picked. We went for variable rate nutrient applications, nitrogen modeling, irrigation water management, split nitrogen applications, targeted natural filters, and cover crops. So something that we felt kind of a manageable short list of things that provided both value to producers and to water quality. Okay, so I've got a couple of slides, one just so I can kind of go over, because part of what I wanted to talk about too is with conversations that I've had with farmers, agribusinesses over this past year of where we saw maybe some opportunities and some gaps in services and things like that that we needed some help with to actually get some more of these on the ground. So with variable rate applications, you know, they're most familiar with it. The idea is that you're using nutrients more efficiently by applying the nutrients where the crops can actually use them. So you're varying the rate across the field. So when we had talked to folks at our outreach events and things like that, this isn't scientific, so you know, if this is a conversation too, if anybody wants to chime in here, you're welcome to. But what I had heard from talking to people was that there were sort of technical needs. People were buying equipment and not implementing this technology necessarily, that they had gaps. You know, they didn't necessarily have the technical assistance or where they could get it to implement it. So there were needs for data management, you know, how to get the yield data off of their monitors and clean it up and use it. Who would make those variable rate nutrient management recommendations and plug it back in? If it was grid sampling or zone soil sampling, you know, somebody that would go out and do that. So, and then programming and calibrating the hardware itself. So if you do offer those services, I'll get to this a little later in the presentation, but we're looking at putting together a directory maybe to help connect people to folks who provide those services. If you don't provide those services and you have the capacity to, maybe consider it. Okay. Nitrogen modeling, if you're not familiar with it, it's a tool that, it's an in-season tool where you can look at sort of the nitrogen status in your crop and in your soils throughout the season. It's location specific and it's responsive to weather and soils and things like that. There's a couple of vendors right now. It's very proprietary. And there's a couple of vendors who do it on shore right now. In the next few years, there will be a couple more for this coming online. These are just a couple of images that I pulled off the web. So Cornell field trials for this in New York and Iowa, nothing super local, have shown on average, not in every field and every year, but there's an average profitability increase and an average loss in leaching, or reduction in leaching, I should say. And so over the next year or 2 years, we're going to be trying to work with local producers who are using these models to see if we can kind of bring that data locally and see what the economic and environmental benefits are. Okay. This was just a little bit of a tangent as I was putting some of these slides together that occurred to me, and I just thought I would share it with you. Because, you know, we talk a lot about precision agriculture, and I remembered, you know, I attended 4-H summer camp, and, you know, they hand suburban kids air rifles and teach them the difference between precision and accuracy. And it just seemed like it had some application here. You know, with precision, you are trying to have precision. You're trying to go over the same mark every time. And that makes sense when you're talking about auto steer. It makes sense if you're talking about section control. But there's also accuracy, where you're talking about correctness, you know. And I think we talk about precision agriculture, but we're also trying to make our agriculture, our applications more accurate, you know. So even though we say precision agriculture, we're really talking about both. And I want to kind of think of it as both, that we're not just consistent, we're also trying to be correct and accurate. So with irrigation water management, this is a piece, it's important here, especially because about 1/4 of our cropland is irrigated. And as I had mentioned earlier, you know, our soils, a lot of our soils, especially where they're irrigated, have a low nutrient holding capacity and they have a low water holding capacity. And so on the one hand, irrigation is really good for profitability, and it can be good for water quality, because on those drought years, it definitely saves you when you wouldn't have much of a crop at all. And so those nutrients would you applied at the beginning of the season actually get taken up, where in a drought year, they would have a lot left over in the soil. On non-drought years, irrigation still helps bump up those yields, but you have to have a really control of your management, because it's really easy to over-irrigate and have those nutrients leach through your soil profile, especially when you do have a high water table and lose those nutrients. And it's easy to under-irrigate, and then you're not making the most use of that system. Okay, so even though this doesn't necessarily seem like it's related to the 4 Rs, it really, really is. Okay, split nitrogen applications. Now I know that almost everybody splits their nitrogen applications. Okay, so I'm not talking about whether or not guys do it at all. I had done some work previously, a couple of different surveys that talked about how people split their applications on corn. And about, at least, this is probably a little dated, but about half of people put about half of their nitrogen up front. And there's some people who put more than half of their nitrogen up front, but not all of it. And there's some more people who put less than half of their nitrogen up front, and then the bulk of it later. Okay? So if you're putting half of it up front at planting or before planting and half of it later on, all of that, if you have your low capacity of soil to hold nitrogen, say your soil can hold 20 pounds of nitrogen and you've put 100 pounds on, okay? That until your crop is taking it up, all of that excess is vulnerable to loss, okay? It's not saying that you're going to lose it. It's not saying you're going to lose all of it, for sure. It's saying you might get a rain, you might lose some of it, you might not. But it's vulnerable. So if it's feasible, if it's practical, it makes sense to minimize what you're putting on the front end and maximize what you're putting on later on in the season, okay? Our crops need a lot of nitrogen. Our soils can't hold a lot of it, okay? And really, all of these other strategies that I've talked about so far are very dependent on this strategy here. It doesn't do you any good to use a nitrogen model if you've loaded all your nitrogen on the front end of the season, and then the nitrogen model tells you that yes, you did in fact lose it to a rain, and you have to go back and apply more. It hasn't really helped you out in that case. It hasn't made you more profitable in that case. It just confirmed probably what you already knew, okay? So we're also looking at targeted natural filters. There's a separate team at the Nature Conservancy that's looking at the places where natural filters would make the biggest impact. And so in tying it back in with this effort, I was also kind of kicking around the idea of combining it with a profitability analysis. So I think that it is possible, or for people who are maybe considering this as a potential service, to work with farmers who have multiple years of yield data and figuring out where those least profitable areas are, and not even least profitable, but where farmers are actually consistently losing money, where they would actually improve their profitability by not planting anything at all, and then seeking out maybe alternatives for what they could do in those areas, okay? So natural filters are one potential use for those areas, depending on where they're located in the field, but they could also be put into pollinator habitats. There's the idea of patchwork planting, where you're planting it in a crop that just uses less expensive inputs like barley or something. And again, it's not going to work everywhere. It depends on the size of these areas and if it's feasible to get around, but it may work for some. And then cover crops. Cover crops are just a big practice in this area. So they are popular for both water quality and for soil health. How effective they are for water quality or for profitability kind of depends on the year. If you've had a year where you've had stellar yields, there's not a whole lot of nitrogen left over at the end of the season to take up with a cover crop. So that's not, that would affect probably the species that you might want to plant if you have that kind of flexibility. If you don't, I think a lot of programs and stuff aren't maybe that responsive to changing up that way. But basically, there's a lot of considerations that go into the timing, the species, and the kill down dates and everything like that. So it's one of our priority practices, and there's a lot that goes into figuring that out as well.
And the cover crop program tend to be a few years behind adding some of these new practices to the program, different species, and in the Midwest they're doing a lot of work with cover crop programs using multiple species. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's one guy using this cover crop. There are good reasons for using all of them, and we're still so very limited in our cover crop program.
I am encouraged, it's slow, but I am encouraged that our cover crop programs are responsive.
Yes,
they're working on it.
They're working on it, but boy, are they slow.
There's a lot of people that weigh in on those decisions.
I know.
So it's just...
most of them.
All right, so in the handouts that I have, there's one of the fact sheets is on the RCPP, So it's the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. The Nature Conservancy applied for this project, so there's cost share funding available for advanced nutrient management practices in these target watersheds in the Choptank, Nanticoke, and Pocomoke mostly. About $350,000 available for the practices listed, and about $257,000 available through CSP, the Conservation Stewardship Program. Okay. And then we also have about $2.5 million available through wetland reserve easements. Those are expensive. Okay. Thanks, Jen. Oh no. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and skip through this one just because I think we are running a little short on time. What I was going to ask you was, and I'll just ask you to think about it, just in your head, as far as, because everybody's here at crop school, because everybody has a role that they play in for our nutrient stewardship. Either you are making recommendations, or you are working with a program that offers cost share, or you are a scientist or researcher that's developing the science behind these recommendations. Everybody has a role. They have a stake. They have a piece of this. So I just kind of wanted to get everybody on the same page thinking about how they plug into this somewhere. And so what we're trying to do with the 4R Alliance really is get everybody talking and on the same page, bring everybody to the same table, because we'll work more efficiently, we'll work better by doing that. Kind of like the gears on a machine. If all the teeth are aligned, then it's a better functioning machine. Okay, so another one of the papers that I have in there that you can look at later on is where we're looking for how we can collaborate with different groups. So this was just one example that I had from that, where we were looking at potentially working with agribusinesses. So your role working in this 4R process is that you write recommendations for farmers, and that you have potential or capacity to influence their decisions over time. So one of the ways that you might be interested in helping is working with us to write an article or something on a 4R strategy, that it's a service that you offer or something like that, and why it's a benefit to your customers. Or sharing with us a farmer that you work with that's had a success that we can share and we can do outreach on. And then the benefits to you would be exposure through that published article. We're trying to work with like the Delmarva Farmer and Mid-Atlantic Farm Credit and things like that to have outlets for these communications. And that you would be helping to tell the story of farmers' good stewardship, which everybody I think kind of agrees in concept is an important goal. So. Another thing that we're working on is the Chesapeake 4R Advocate Program. And that's the last paper that you have in there, where through the end of the month we're looking for nominations for a farmer that is good for our nutrient steward. They have a similar advocate program nationally, but we're looking for local stewards. So if there's somebody that kind of stands out from the crowd and does a good job, we're looking to highlight that farmer and their consultant. And to contribute, again, a positive source. So they would probably have we would look to do a field day on their farm over this next year to talk about the work that they're doing and the things that have worked for them. But again, it's a good opportunity to highlight the work that they do and the work that you do. So if you know of anybody, you've got, I think, a couple of weeks to get that in. Shouldn't be too painful. I mentioned it earlier, but again, you know, some of the feedback that we'd heard was that it would be important to connect farmers with technical service providers. So we're looking to put together a directory. We don't know exactly what that looks like yet. We're just kind of getting our feet under us still. It probably won't look like the yellow pages, but it might take the form of like a booklet that can be put into different providers. establishments. It can be put on our website, kind of like, I don't know if you have cable, you probably don't have WBOC, but they have their Delmarva experts, so something, it could take a couple of different forms. It could be both, but we'll be looking at that. So to recap, the Chesapeake 4R Alliance is working to ensure that every nutrient application is consistent with the 4 Rs. Everybody in this room is already invested in a thriving ag community and a healthy Chesapeake, but working together, we can identify the right strategies to reduce nutrient loss and improve farmers' profitability. We can provide the outreach and information on those strategies. We can show that farmers are doing a good job and get them credit for their successes. And so last, I just wanted to take an opportunity to get some information from you. If you were interested in being listed in that directory, in following up to know if we have grower meetings coming up. We have the Delmarva Conservation Partnership is kind of linked to this, and they have a meeting coming up in January. If you would like to receive some more,
That's how we kind of
meeting coming up. I think I did. Do I have time to just open up that one last poll? Because all I was going to say is you could text your email or something to that poll, or I can just have a paper up here to sign your email, or you can drop a business card, or the kind of like whatever is the easiest way for you to do that, to make sure that I would follow up with you after today's presentation. I'll probably skip that for this one again, just for the sake of time. So my email actually is on pretty much everything I handed out and at the bottom of this presentation here. But does anybody have any questions?
Any plans to move this to the western shore too?
Not at this time, to my knowledge. I know that the Nature Conservancy is looking to expand this effort. So I've been working with them part-time on this right now, but they're looking to increase their capacity for this. So I don't know, maybe there would be some room in that. Yep.
They would need to have good partners come forward, right? Because Delmarva Agribusiness was one of the first people.
Right.
And they're Delmarva based, so
Yep.
they would need to get that kind of thing to the buy-in over there to help move forward, I think.
Right. And there is interest. I mean, there's other 4R efforts. There's a Pennsylvania 4R Alliance that they had been active for a while. And there's efforts in Western Lake Erie Basin. There's something down in Florida. So I think as it gains momentum, there's more interest in kind of funding other efforts as well. Scott?
Your focus now is on those 3 watersheds, correct?
Well, for the funding.
For the fund.
Right.
EQIP. I'm
Yep.
talking about the EQIP. That's additional EQIP funding.
That is it's confusing because it's that
Because there is a
RCPP equip.
cap right now on EQIP.
Yes.
for the state level. So this is above that cap, right?
Oh, that's a good question. There is a cap for advanced nutrient management under regular equip. There was last year a different cap, a slightly higher cap under the RCPP equip cap, but I don't know what the status is of this going into next year's program.
So right now there's 3 watersheds started last year. Now typical EQIP contract, I think
3 years.
3 years. So you got, so there's 15, 16, so 7. Next year will be the last year.
Well, so this year, the ones that sign up this year will still run for 3 years. So this is the last sign up year, and this is the last year to sign up for this, but it'll run 17, 18, 19.
We got 17, 18, 19.
Right.
And then if you got another sign.
No, I'm done.
We got one left.
I'm done. Actually, I don't know if that's true. There might, depending on, anything is possible, depending on the way funding works out.
fertility, is that going to see any differences across release year?
Off of the current program to make a decision on whether or not to expand it to other areas.
Right. I think
Probably the best.
they had the opportunity to go and, I mean, for another RCPP project, and the Nature Conservancy didn't do it this time. But they kind of deferred the idea, or, you know, the decision to apply for it again. So that's not to say that they won't. It was just kind of, let's take a breather and see, because it is a lot of work to coordinate it and pull all of it together. So let's give ourselves a year and kind of get the details right, and give us a chance to evaluate and see how it worked, and come back the next year and decide whether or not to move forward and apply for another grant. Yeah. So, but there's always regular equip, just not the RCPP equip. The RCPP
But
equip.
they started up here with the equip, now they're down here.
I know.
On the funding level.
Right.
That's what my concern is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, any other questions? All right. Thanks everybody for participating in the polls too. I appreciate that.